This lesson examines the effects on employment contracts of asymmetric information and talks about ways to mitigate those effects. You might care because asymmetric information can adversely affect employment contracts. Most of the problems we've been discussing earlier about with the difficulty of aligning interests stem from asymmetric information. The main points. Information is asymmetric when one party in a transaction or negotiation knows more than another party. Two consequences of asymmetric information are adverse selection and moral hazard. One way to reduce adverse selection is through screens. One way to reduce moral hazard is through monitoring and incentives. It's important to remember that no solution is perfect. The best solution varies predictably. Sometimes the cost of solving a problem is bigger than the cost of the problem itself. In that case, the problem does not exist. At the end of the lesson, the successful student should be able to define asymmetric information, moral hazard, and adverse selection. You should be able to identify how to use screens to mitigate against adverse selection and moral hazard in employment contracts. The takeaways. Know when you know less than the other party in an exchange. Beware of moral hazard and adverse selection. Work to identify screens to reduce your exposure to adverse selection and moral hazard in employment contracts. Work to identify how to use monitoring and contingency contracts to reduce your exposure to moral hazard in employment contracts. And finally, remember that if no solution exists, then the problem does not exist.